Okay guys, so today I'm doing an introduction to Dragon Tail, or Draco Tail as it's more likely to be called in the TCG. If you are new to my channel, I tend to stay away from combos and spreadsheets because they are everywhere on YouTube and don't give you an understanding of how the game works. Instead, I focus on deck theory and game plan. What is the game plan? What are the fundamental mechanics or gimmicks that a deck revolves around that make it good? So in this video, I will do 3 individual things in a structured way. Firstly, a brief overview of the most important cards in the Dragon Tail archetype so that you can follow along with the rest of the video. Secondly, I will show you a combo line that illustrates how to sequence your plays in order to use the Dragon Tail resource loop, which is the fundamental, most important part of this entire archetype. And then thirdly, I will go over some basic deck theory and metagame points so that you understand how well this deck is likely to fare into the Justice Hunters meta. Okay, let's get started. By the way, if you are one of the overwhelming 70% of viewers that routinely watch my videos and are not subscribed, why? Why would you do that? Also, you can join the Discord if you want. It's pretty active, and you can also @ me in one of the public Discord channels, and I will respond to you. So if you have any questions there, leave a comment in the YouTube below or whatever. Okay, so let's get started with the card overview. So it's important to mention that you are usually going to be going into one of 2 extra deck monsters, the in-archetype extra deck monsters. There are other options that you can go into, like Mysterian the Dragon Crown and Secretarian Dragon, which I'll talk about more in a moment. But usually the other cards like Winda or Dragoon, or even Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon are a little bit more gimmicky, and you have to play a lot of other things in your deck, and it's kind of like a high roll type strategy where you have to draw a bunch of cards in your opening hand and you're trying to kind of like gimmick people with a turn 0 play. So instead, I'm trying to focus more on the most realistic, most high performing type of build in the OCG right now, which is the K9 version. But this is not a K9 video. I'm just going to talk about the Dragon Tail game plan and resource loop. So to go into your fusion monsters, you have Dragon Tail Phimena. This one is the turn 0 card that I'm sure everyone is most familiar with. So during the main phase, quick effect, so either player's main phase, you can discard this card as cost, fusion summon 1 dragon or spellcaster fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field. Now, because this does not lock you into the archetype and it says dragon or spellcaster, this is why there are a bunch of turn 0 gimmicks with this card where you can make stuff like Shadal, Winda, or whatever. Because as long as you have access to a dark monster, like this could be a dark Dragon Tail monster, and then some other Shadal type card, you could go into a Winda because this is a spellcaster, and this just says that you're making a dragon or spellcaster fusion monster using monsters from your hand or field. However, those gimmicks are things that I'm trying to ignore in the video, and I will do more advanced videos on Dragon Tail in the future that talk about different versions you can play, and I'll talk more about that then. If this card is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set 1 Dragon Tail spell/trap from your deck. You can only use each of these effects once per turn. Now, every single Dragon Tail monster basically has the same final effect, where if it's sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set a Dragon Tail spell or trap, and that is a extremely important part, not just of the resource loop, but also of their ceiling for their end board. So then we have Dragon Tail Lucius, which is kind of the basic starter of the deck. So if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Dragon Tail monster from your deck to your hand except itself, and if it is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, like with all of the other cards, you can set a Dragon Tail spell or trap from your deck, and these effects are once per turn. Now, Dragon Tail Lucius and Phimena are a little bit unusual in that when they are used as fusion material and they set a Dragon Tail spell or trap, they don't do anything else on top of that. However, when you go to look at the other monsters, you will see that they have additional effects as well. So Muller says, during the main phase, quick effect, you can fusion summon 1 Dragon Tail fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field, but you cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except fusion monsters. So this is a lock that some of the cards, but not all of them, will place on the Dragon Tail archetype. Now, this does say during the main phase, and a very important point to note about this card is that a lot of Dragon Tail builds, especially the Primite version, are trying to make the seals on their turn 1, which does require 2 dragon monsters, and your deck is half dragon, half spellcaster. There are lots of tricks of getting this out. Because if you make a Muller in the opponent's turn, then the Muller is able to fusion summon out of turn. So this is during the main phase, any player's main phase. If this card is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set 1 Dragon Tail spell or trap from your deck. Then you can negate the effects of 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. So this is what I was saying about how besides the Lucius and the Phimena, all of the other ones have some bonus effect after you set a spell or trap. So this one negates the effects of a face-up monster your opponent controls. So then we have the Urgula. So this one If it is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set a Dragon Tail spell or trap from your deck, and then you can destroy a spell or trap on the field. I hope you're starting to notice the trend of this being a toolbox deck, where even though you are going neg to use your fusion summon type cards, like your fusion spells or your fusion monsters that have fusion type effects, you're usually going to be recouping these resources in some way, either because you are setting a spell or trap that does something else, or because you're going to be interacting with your opponent's board, for example, like destroying a spell or trap on the field. Then, if this card is in your graveyard, you can target one spellcaster Dragon Tail monster in your graveyard, place this card on the bottom of the deck, and if you do, add that monster to your hand. That's also a pretty important effect that you'll see in the resource loop. Then we have Dragon Tail Pan. So this one, if it's sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set a Dragon Tail spell or trap from your deck, like you can with all of them. But then with this one, you can destroy a monster on the field. So of course, the toolbox is expanding as we go through more of the cards. If a face-up fusion monsters you control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect while this card is in your graveyard, you can place this card on the bottom of the deck, and if you do, special summon a non-fusion Dragon Tail monster from your graveyard. So then we have the fusion spells. So there is Ketu Dragon Tail. This one is just a searcher. Add one Dragon Tail monster from your deck to your hand. Then if your opponent controls a monster, you can fusion summon one dragon or spellcaster monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field. Now keep in mind, this is one of the cards in Dragon Tail that does not create a lock. So even though you have to choose a dragon or spellcaster monster, you are not locked into fusion summoning or into Dragon Tail monsters or anything like that. However, if you use Rahu Dragon Tail, there is a strong lock. So this one says you fusion summon a Dragon Tail fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand, deck, and or field. Also, you cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of this turn after this card resolves, except fusion monsters. So this may appear to be a branded fusion, but it actually isn't in practice, because even though you can use materials from your deck, if you go over the Dragon Tail Altharion, this one of the two boss monsters in Archetype, requires a Dragon Tail monster and then 1+ monsters in the hand. So if this card is fusion summoned, you can target monsters on the field and or in any graveyards up to the number of monsters used as material from the hand, because you can use any number of materials from the hand, then you return those cards to the hand. So you're basically bouncing from the grave or field, and you get as many bounces as you have materials from the hand. If two or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time while this card is in your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. The other guy has the same other effect, where if two or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. But then this one has a different on-field effect, where when you activate a Dragon Tail card or effect, quick effect, you can target one card your opponent controls and destroy it. Because this is a when effect, it means that your opponent can actually stop you from activating this. This is not a regular trigger effect. This is not an if trigger effect. So you cannot use this as part of your chain blocking, and I'll show you what that looks like in the combo in a moment. So these are the basic cards in Dragon Tail. Now I'll go over the resource loop so you can see what the combo looks like, and then I'll talk about some of the larger metagame points you have to keep in mind to make this deck work properly. So, okay, the basic combo is going to be Lucius, which is the searcher, and then any blank monster. So our blank monster is going to be Perulia, and here we're going to normal summon the Lucius and declare the effect. So remember, if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add a Dragon Tail monster from your deck to your hand except itself. And then, of course, if it's sent to the graveyard as fusion material, then you can set a Dragon Tail spell or trap from your deck. So here we're going to search for the Phimena. Now we have a monster on field, which is a Dragon Tail, and we have a blank monster in our hand. So because we have searched for the Phimena, we can use her as cost to fusion summon using monsters from our hand or field. So using those two monsters, we can go into the Altharion, and this has a trigger effect where we can bounce stuff on the field or in the grave. So here we can declare some triggers. Because the Lucius was used as fusion material, we can set a Dragon Tail spell or trap, but Lucius, like Phimena, is one of the ones that does not gain a bonus effect after setting a spell or trap. So we're just setting a spell or trap here. And now the Altharion is going to bounce the Phimena back to our hand. You're going to do this for two reasons. First of all, you have already used the Lucius's effect when sent as material to set a spell or trap, but you have not used Phimena's effect because she was sent as cost to fusion summon. She was not one of the fusion materials. Also, just generally speaking, you always want to end with Phimena in your hand because this will allow you to fusion summon out of turn. So even if you weren't going to be doing something next, you would still want to end with the Phimena in hand. Now we can activate the Rahu Dragon Tail, which fusion summons a Dragon Tail only fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand, deck, and or field, and then you're locked into fusion summoning for the rest of the turn. So we go Rahu, and here we can use the 5 mana from hand, and we're also going to use the Urgula from deck. Because remember, if this is sent to the graveyard as material for a fusion summon, you can set a Dragon Tail spell or trap from your deck, and then you can destroy a spell or trap on the field. So one other theme with this deck is that you often gain some bonus if your opponent has cards on the field. And because this is Justice Hunter's meta, that does not mean that you are going second per se, because there are lots of turn 0 plays now with Vanquish Soul, K9, Dragon Tail, etc. So this can come up even if it's your first turn and you're not going second. But you also want to use the card economy of the other graveyard effect, which is you can target a spellcaster Dragon Tail monster in your graveyard, place this on the bottom of your deck, and if you do, add that monster to your hand. So because the 5 mana is a spellcaster, that's usually how we keep the 5 mana in our hand. We don't want to just use it as material to not get it back later. So yeah, we're going to use the effects of our 2 monsters that were sent to the graveyard, the Urgula and the 5 mana, to set now our traps, because we have gone through our Rahu Dragon Tail effect, and we're not going to be performing any more fusion summons, so we don't need to search for the other fusion spell. We're just going to set both traps. And then we can use the graveyard effect of the Urgula to add back the 5 mana to our hand so that we can fusion summon out of turn. Now, the important thing to go over here is that this comes off of the Lucius and a blank, and you can do this with almost any hand, because you're going to have some combination of Dragon Tail monsters in your hand. Whether you've searched something off of Lucius or not is pretty irrelevant. Whether you've used the Ketu Dragon Tail, the other fusion spell, or not, it's kind of like all the same thing. So almost any hand is going to lead to basically this end board, and that's why this is the only combo I'm going to show you in this video. But it is very important to note that for the end board, the 2 trap cards are extremely important sealing cards. So Dragon Tail Flame says you target a face-up spell on the field, negate its effects until the end of this turn, and then you can place 1 Dragon Tail card from your graveyard or banishment on the bottom of the deck, except itself, and draw 1 card. Then the other one, which is Dragon Tail Horn, says you can target an attack position monster on the field, so there are ways to play around this, return it to the hand or extra deck, then you can place a Dragon Tail card from your graveyard or banishment on the bottom of your deck, except itself, and draw 1 card. So not only are these sealing cards, but they are also a different type of layer. You don't want to only have your layers, like all of your power cards, concentrated, for example, in a monster zone, and then lose to 1 card like a Drop It or a Dark Ruler. You always want to have your interactions in different zones. So here we have spells and traps in the spell and trap zone, and we also have a quick effect of fusion summon in our hand. So we have a hand and we have a back row. And then whenever we activate a Dragon Tail card or effect, then you can add on to the chain. So you can't chain block, but if your opponent does not respond, you can add on to the chain and target a card your opponent controls and destroy it. So this is kind of like a useful card to have on field that also may force your opponent to use their cards in awkward situations because they don't want you to be able to chain this card. And these cards will also float once they are in the graveyard because of the final effect, where if 2 or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time, which is basically every time you fusion summon, then you can special summon this card but banish it when it leaves the field. So this is the basic Dragon Tail resource loop. Okay, so now I want to go over some of the basic metagame points that you have to keep in mind to remember, like how this deck works properly. So I'm talking about the trap cards here for a second. So because these cards, they do whatever their effect is, like targeting a face-up spell on the field and getting the effects, then you can place a Dragon Tail card from your graveyard or banishment on the bottom of the deck and draw 1 card. Because this both draws a card and also moves something from the graveyard, both Ghost Bell and Ash Blossom stop the Dragon Tail traps. So right now in the TCG, those cards are not very popular. Even Ash Blossom is a card that has gone into some people's side decks, or some people aren't playing it at all. But it is worth mentioning that in the Justice Hunters meta, Ghost Bell may be a lot more popular, and so there is going to be counterplay that you can't necessarily read if your opponent has drawn a hand trap for. So that is a major downside of the traps. That being said, I don't know if people are actually going to play those cards, but you do need to know how that works. So then another thing here is there are a bunch of different layers to how this deck can be played. For example, in the OCG, initially, a lot of people were playing the King of the Swamp package because you could either search Polymerization to have a different way to fuse, but also the King of the Swamp itself can take up the name of another monster like Dragoon or Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. And so you had some cheesier turn 0 plays, or even if it wasn't turn 0, you had some like other strong boss monsters you could go into. But I feel like these cards are kind of gimmicky because you have to both draw King of the Swamp and also 5 mana and then another body as well. It's like a 3-card combo to go into Dragoon. And I don't think you should build your deck around 3-card combos, even though this is a deck with a very large engine. So yeah, I'm not really like a huge fan of that. So the other thing here to note is that Retaliating Sea says when your opponent activates a spell card that includes an effect that special summons a monster, then you can special summon this card from your hand, and if special summon this way while this card is face up on the field, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So this is one of those cards that is pretty strong against Dragontail. People may remember this from previous metas. I think when people were playing Azamina cards, you could chain this to Hallowed Azamina, and you don't want to be playing under basically a D shifter. So there are like weird evolutions of the metagame in the OCG that have happened where people started playing Retaliating Sea to beat the Dragontail fusion spells. But then in the OCG, people started playing Cutting Polymerization and the King of the Swamp package. And then they instead tried using more monsters that have effects that perform fusion summons. So the 5 mana is the in-archetype monster that performs a fusion summon, but people are also playing this card, Performable Odd Eyes Dissolver. So this one's pendulum effect says, once per turn during your main phase, you can fusion summon a dragon fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. So this is basically like a polymerization that stays on your field as once per turn. It's kind of like Neg, so this is really like a meta call. And then people were also playing Cartesia, because this is also a monster effect that fuses. I feel like maybe I don't know which one is better, because when you use this one, you can't use itself as material. This is basically just acting as a poly. But with this one, you actually can use this as material as well. So they're kind of like weird cards in different ways. And maybe it depends on the kind of build you're playing, which one you want to go for. Okay, some other stuff to notice is that in the mirror match, this card is exceptionally strong. So this card requires a dragon and spellcaster, and your deck is half dragon, half spellcaster. And it says this card loses 100 attack for each of your banished cards. While you control this fusion summon card, your opponent cannot activate the effects of special summon dragon or spellcaster monsters they control. So obviously, if the mirror is they're using all dragon and spellcaster, you know, hypothetically in a pure version, then they basically can't do anything. And this also has another effect to target a dragon and spellcaster monster in your graveyard. You special summon one and place the other on the bottom of the deck. So that's pretty useful also for the resource loop as well. And because this is a dragon monster, if you bring out a dragon monster from your graveyard, you will have 2 dragons, and you could go into seals, and then out of turn the seals can bring out, for example, a Muller, which can be a quick effect fuse. But you could also go for stuff like the I don't actually remember how is this card spelled again? The Koku Meru Dragu card. Let me just see if I can find this real quick. Yeah, this one. So this one you can bring out off of seals. And this one says neither player can special summon light or dark monsters. So this guy is earth. This guy is water. So your main monsters are not affected by the Koku Meru Dragon because they're not light or dark. So yeah, and the like dark monsters you have in the extra deck, like Muller, is just going to be used as fusion material, or you could also just normal summon him, so you're not really affected by the lock too much. Maybe just some other cards from the extra deck, but you know, obviously if you have them under the lock, you set it up in a way where it's going to be beneficial for you and not your opponent. So the other thing is that the Canine package has started becoming very, very popular in the OCG. And you're trying to bring out an early Ripper. If you're playing Dragontail specifically and you want to play Canine, one of the things you can do is bring out an early Ripper, because this card says, where is it? When your opponent activates a monster effect in the hand or graveyard, you can detach 1 material from this card and negate that effect. So with the Retaliating Sea, this card activates in the hand, and if you don't want to be Retaliating Seed, you can use your Ripper to negate the Retaliating Sea. But then there are a bunch of other cards also as well that you don't want your opponent to be able to activate from the hand if you are the Dragontail player. Like, you don't want them to activate Retaliating Sea, but you also don't want them to activate Nib. Or if you're in the mirror, you also don't want them to activate Dragontail 5 mana. So there's quite a lot of back and forth and sometimes mind games based on how you want to use the Ripper. But I feel like the Canine package solves a lot of issues that the Dragontail deck inherently has, and it's probably one of the strongest options you can play. The last thing I wanted to say is that there are quite a lot of options for different ways you could play this deck. There is a Magistus package that I'm not going to go over now, and I'm sure people will also maybe test with Branded and stuff like that. I feel like the Canine cards do 2 different things for this deck. The first, which I've briefly touched on so far, is they give Dragontail specifically, we're not just talking about Canine being a good splashable engine and whatever, Dragontail specifically, because of Ripper, has ways of negating Retaliating Sea, or if you're trying to make the larger Dragontail boards that are more susceptible to Nibiru, which is what tends to happen if you're mixing Canine and Dragontail, because then you have like more plays to make, then the Ripper is also very good against the Nibiru. So I feel like this does solve a lot of issues, but also, if you think about the chance of you having a turn 0 play with just 5 mana, it's only like a third of the time. Like around 30% of the time you're going to have a turn 0 play. But adding the Izuna to your card count, so instead of you just having 3 turn 0 cards, you also have 3 more, and that goes up to, I think it's like 60, close to 70%. I'll double check the math, but it's pretty close to that. So now the majority of games that you play, it's actually, I think, closer to 60%, not 70, sorry. It might be like very high 50s. So the chance of you having a turn 0 play when you've lost the dice roll is actually the slim majority of the time. And your opponent also has to think a little bit differently about that. Like if they know you're on both these packages, it's not just, oh, you know, they feel like they got unlucky because you drew 5 mana, because you're going to have both of these. So actually most of the time you're going to have a turn 0 play. You don't have to play the larger K9 package. That's more of an option, but I think you probably should play the Izuna and the Lupa stuff. So that's basically everything for this video, and I will cover more Dragon Tail and more Justice Hunter stuff in the future, but this is my introduction to Dragon Tail video. Thanks for watching. Remember, you can join the Discord if you want, and comment down below if you have any suggestions.